What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. A lot of stuff to talk about today. We get our first look at a Nintendo VR game, which is interesting. And now there's this mystery announcement for Pokemon that's put out there as this weird cryptic message for us to try to figure out. And it looks like everything's going down July 19th. This is all released by Game Freak and the Pokemon Company themselves. So, let's get started. So the Nintendo VR game that is now available today over in Shinjuku, Japan, is pretty cool. It's Mario Kart. It's Mario Kart VR. It looks fun, it looks crazy, and at times it looks terrifying. But it is now there for people to play at the VR zone, and that's done by Bandai Namco. Now, there are a ton of other VR games there, but this appears to be the big headline one because it's one that Nintendo is doing alongside them with their intellectual properties. This is the first time you're really going to be able to kind of fly around in Mario Kart, around tracks, first person, picking up shells and throwing them in a VR setting, and it looks insane. It almost looks like some people may get motion sick from it because it looks so crazy. But man, what a cool idea for an arcade game. I feel like that would do well in like a Dave & Buster's or something, but this is the first place it's going to be. And what's interesting is they showed a preview of it and they showed them using an HTC Vive, and that is what you're using here. It has like a big setup, like it looks like a Mario, a cart that you sit in like from Mario Kart. And then you have like an actual HTC Vive headset you put on along with a controller so that you could throw the shells and everything. And it looks absolutely crazy. I don't know if I'll ever get to try it unless it comes over here, but it looks really fun. At least it looks like it's at least worth a shot. And this is interesting because is there a possibility that this is kind of Nintendo's just kind of playing around with the idea of VR for future, I guess, inventions or projects going forward? Because maybe they're kind of playing around with it here and seeing how something like a Mario Kart would work in first person through VR. And maybe they have some plans going forward. It's always something to think about, obviously, but in this case, it's a reality now. You can go play VR Mario Kart as long as you're over in Japan, or maybe when you travel over there for a trip, maybe stop by the VR zone and take a shot at it. Oh, and real quick, we talked about Xenoverse 2 yesterday on the Switch. Well, they released gameplay footage, at least allegedly gameplay footage. It looks about right. It doesn't look as good as the Xbox One and the PS4 version, and it runs at a lower frame rate, but it looks good. It looks like Xenoverse 2, and it's going to be fully portable. So I would head over there and check out the trailer if you're just at all curious as to how it's going to look on a portable Switch. I have to say, though, it looks great. It has everything in it, and apparently the price is going to be $50, so it's $10 less than when it first came out, which makes sense. It's a little older now, and it doesn't come with the DLC, so I guess that's kind of that give or take there, them kind of meeting everyone in the middle, or I've obviously ordered on Amazon. It'll just be $40 if you have Prime, so not bad. Next up, we have our first app on the Switch that has launched, and that is in Japan. It's a Nico Nico app is what it's called, and it is essentially kind of their version of YouTube, if you will, where you upload videos, but instead of the comments kind of being down below the video, they will actually be set to appear over top the video and let people kind of interact with that video going forward. And it's done really well in Japan. It's actually the 8th most visited site in Japan right now. There's a lot of people out there right now asking, well, why is it Nico Nico? Why is that showing up there and it's not YouTube or Netflix or Hulu? Well, to be honest, Nintendo actually owns shares in Nico Nico, so it makes sense why they would go with that rather than, say, a Netflix or a YouTube, because they control it to an extent, or at least they have some vested interest in it, and they can kind of put it on their system, help push it more in Japan, where the Switch is extremely popular, obviously, and more than likely, the people in Japan will download and use that, and it benefits Nintendo. It helps a program get more popular they have some kind of vested interest in. But you could also see this kind of as a test from Nintendo to see how these apps are going to work in their eShop and really on their system. It's a video streaming app, so video is being streamed to it, and this will give them an idea of how well something like YouTube or Netflix or anything will play. And then obviously we're going to move forward to where everyone gets Netflix and everyone gets something like Hulu or YouTube or a web browser. All of those apps will come in time. I think it's obvious. The Tegra's known hardware. It's nothing fancy they're making YouTube for. In fact, I bet you they could probably port YouTube from an Android device to the Switch, and it would work reasonably well. But now I'm curious what you guys would like to see on the Switch come over. What kind of app are you waiting for? Are you waiting for Netflix? That's the one I'm waiting for, because consider Netflix on the Switch as a hybrid console where you have it sitting in the dock while you're at home, and maybe you want to get up and go into the other room or the kitchen or something, you take it with you, and maybe in that case you have multiple docks, so you actually take your streaming device around to different TVs in your house. That is a great idea. I actually like that a lot. And maybe we go forward and we get something like Hulu, and then of course we get all the different apps. Maybe you're a baseball fan, MLB.TV comes over. So at this point, I think a lot of people are hoping the floodgates are opening, and it's just a matter of time before we see all of these video streaming apps that we can use. Next up, we finally get to see Intel kind of sweat now that AMD is coming out with all of these new processors that are competing heavily in the price, in the performance per watt, basically everything you could think of that is important about a processor, even speed. It looks like AMD is right there with Intel, and in some cases they are beating them. And now Intel, this is how you can tell Intel is concerned, or at least they're worried, because generally Intel does not talk about their competition. They kind of pretend like they don't exist, and because in things like the workstation area, they don't usually. When they get into things like servers, they don't ever have to worry about AMD, but now they have to, because they have addressed the AMD processors, Naples, that are showing up to compete with them, and they didn't have the best things to say about it. So this slide you're seeing here was actually under embargo for the past, until July 11th around noon my time. And what you see is them comparing their Xeon to the AMD Naples processor. And what they are trying to say here is that Naples is using 4 different desktop cores, in their words, glued together is how they're doing it. Desktop dies glued together. And on the other side, they're saying, oh, the Xeon is a single die implementation, maximize performance. But if you really look at the charts, Naples is in some cases beating them or right there with them for a cheaper price. And now Intel is trying to explain something like this, where they're like, well, we know it technically works the same, but ours isn't using dies glued together, so you should pick ours. But then, of course, people are going to ask them, well, which one's cheaper and which one gives the better performance? And then they're going to have a hard time explaining that. They're trying to show something that doesn't matter to the vast majority of people to help sell their processors. And this is how you know, like I said, Intel is worried. They are sweating because there is actual competition, which is good because, let's be realistic here, Intel has been kind of on cruise control for a little while now because AMD has not been competitive with them at all. And now AMD kind of is. So Intel's getting a little worried, and they're kind of shooting first here with this kind of chart showing that, I guess on paper, when you start X-raying chips, theirs is more simplified, so it should work better. But when you get in the real world testing, it's pretty neck and neck. The only thing I hope here is that Intel becomes concerned enough to where they really need to compete and need to do whatever they can to make their processors faster, maybe cheaper. Either way, if these two companies are fighting it out right now, we are the only ones that win. Like, they're the ones spending more money to R&D or dropping prices to try to sell more processors. And we're all just standing here like, oh, great. I kind of wanted to get a new processor. It's cheaper now. I'll take it. Or it's better now. Sounds good. So you should always hope that these two companies can compete. And right now, you can tell Intel, they're a little worried. So expect them to start kind of ramping up some innovation, some production, anything to make this work for them again. All right, so let's talk about this Pokemon mystery that's happened. So they released on the Japanese Pokemon YouTube channel, they released a video that is super weird. You're going to start seeing some of it here. The video translates to Pokemon Mystery File, a world of Pokemon you don't know. And it's interesting, it's kind of a compilation of a bunch of weird things that happen in the Pokemon games, whether it's Celebi's appearance in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, there's a mysterious man from Sun and Moon that was really weird, or there's like this distortion world from Pokemon Platinum, and these are all things that people are having a hard time really explaining why. There was even that one instance where there was like a girl who was a ghost, and it's all this weird stuff happening. So now they're saying, well, get ready because something else is happening. They talk about aliens, they talk about UFOs, and it almost feels like they're talking kind of about, I guess, extraterrestrial life in Pokemon. And then we see kind of the unknown kind of floating around and forming a message. And the last scene we see with the unknown kind of lining up, they have a message, and it says, is something happening, with a question mark. And then we get hit with a July 19th date. So what can we make of this? I don't know, unless there is maybe something happening with the unknown, because they talk about how they're kind of like in their own realm. It's weird how their origin is, but it could have something to do with them. Maybe they're announcing new Pokemon or something. I don't know. It's so weird. But it's coming up. It's not far away, at least. They're not like, oh, September something, where we got to sit on this for a while. It's a week, and we'll have some more knowledge of what's going on here. But very weird. take a look at the trailer for yourself and see if you can figure out. A lot of people translated this. It's all over the internet, Kotaku, Polygon. Everyone had all this stuff translated, and it's a very interesting read. I would check it out because now I'm kind of looking forward to next week to see what's happening. All right, so next up, I'm going to hit you with something that's really weird. It's a bad excuse, and I wasn't even really going to cover it, but it blew up on the internet so much, I figured we would talk about it for a quick minute, and that, of course, is Lawbreakers. Now, you may be wondering, why am I talking about that? They entered beta. It didn't do as well as they would like, but it worked. People played it. It didn't really have any major issues, and it's ready for launch whenever they are. But it looks like the director doesn't really understand, or at least the lead designer doesn't really know a lot about some of the other systems other than the PS4 and the PC, because they said the reason they can't bring it to the Switch is because the Switch doesn't have enough buttons, but maybe they could bring it to the Xbox One. So this was in an interview with Gaming Bolt and the Lawbreakers lead designer, Dan Nanny. It was not, people were saying, oh, it was a Cliff, but no, it wasn't Cliff Bleszinski, it was Dan Nanny, and he said this when asked about the Switch. There's a possibility for everything and anything in this world. I think the hardest part with the Switch is the controls. Look at the game that we have right now, and we just literally by the skin of our teeth put the entire game and the control pad that the PlayStation has. That means that we could probably make it work for the Xbox One in some way, right? But if you're looking at the Switch, the base controller that's on the unit, it doesn't have as many buttons. So I know that doesn't make any sense. I hear you, I know. But here's what I think is happening here. One, this person obviously has not spent a lot of time with the Switch. Just because you're a designer of a game doesn't mean you play a lot of games outside of your job. It is the way it is. And in this case, I don't think he knows a lot about the Nintendo Switch, and that's fine. It's not his job. What he should have said here, though, is something like, well, we picked the PS4 right now because it has the largest install base, and maybe we'll revisit the other systems at a later date. That would have been fine. That would have been a fine response. He could have even said, well, the technical aspects of the Switch being a hybrid or using a Tegra just doesn't work with our game engine currently. We may revisit it in the future, because they say there's possibility for everything. That would have been his best response, but for some reason he decides to say that the controls for the Switch, there's not enough buttons, whereas it clearly has actually one more button than the Xbox One technically, because it has the share button, which wouldn't really be used, but it has enough buttons to make that happen. A lot of people are saying, well, analog triggers, sure, that could be a thing, but keep in mind when you're playing on the PC, you're probably using keyboard and mouse, and you're not really rolling around with analog triggers, so they could still make it work if they really wanted to in that department. I think it really comes down to, do they want to take the risk to put it on the Switch where the install base is still fairly young? Specifically, I mean, if you really look at the PC numbers that they had, weren't the best. I think it was like 7,500 users over the span of an hour per average. That was their highest. So they're struggling right now to get people just on board, and I think they went to the PS4 mostly because the install base is large right now, whereas the Switch is still, it's still, the Switch compared to the PS4 in terms of how old it is still an infant compared to the PS4. So, yes, not the best choice of words, obviously. He pretty much just told us that he doesn't really pay attention to the Switch at all. He doesn't need to, just maybe, I guess, think of a better excuse on your feet when somebody asks you something like that. And that's it for Newswave today, guys. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me think about anything we talked about today, whether it is the Lawbreakers excuse for the Switch. Maybe you have some thoughts about that. I just think he just isn't super familiar with it. That's not his job, so maybe he just doesn't care right now. Also, let me think about the Mario VR experience. I think it's very interesting to have that option. I just don't know if I would go to Japan exclusively for that. Maybe if I travel there for fun, I would stop by. Also, let me think about this Pokemon mystery. Do you think you have it figured out after checking the trailer and doing some research? Let us know in the comments your best guess for this, because it's odd. That's it for now, guys. I'll see you next time.